Here at Railroads, it's so important to us that we begin all of our in-person and online presentations with an acknowledgement of the traditional lands. Here at Railroads University, we acknowledge that our campus is located on the traditional lands of the Kusepsum and Lekwungen ancestors and families. It is with great gratitude that we live, learn, work, and play where the past, present, and future scopes of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, staff, and faculty come together. This is a great opportunity to test out the chat box. I see some people have already, which is so exciting. So again, if you look at that black bar below and give the chat box button a click, let us know, where in the world are you joining us from today? What sector are you working in? Also, if you know the acknowledgement of the traditional lands that you are on, please feel comfortable, pop that in the chat box. And for those who might not know what lands they are upon today, we offer you this as an opportunity to learn more about the space you are on. So in a few clicks here, we'll pop into the chat box and say hi to everyone who's joining us. But first, let's head to the next slide and remind all of us why we're here today. We are here to talk about leadership as holding space. Again, my name is Selena Kunar. I'm an education specialist here at Railroads University, and I am thrilled to have Dr. Kathy Bishop, an associate professor and program head within our School of Leadership Studies here at Railroads. A big thank you and welcome to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Selena. Hello, everybody.
We'll hear from Kathy again in just a few slides, but we're going to navigate one more slide over and get to know all of you a little bit better first. So I'm going to pop into the chat box here and take a quick peek at who we have in the room with us today. Oh, we have so many wonderful introductions coming in. We have folks from all over Canada in Calgary, Edmonton, Squamish. We're going global. We have some folks joining us from Puerto Vallarta. Oh, wow. Some wonderful acknowledgements of the traditional lands as well. Kendra joining us from the Texas-Mexico border. Tracy from Prince George. We have Cowichan Valley represented. All across the island, all across the country. We have Lisa joining from Catherine's, Ontario. Oh my gosh. Well, please, everyone, keep those introductions coming in. This is such an exciting way to see everyone who's in the room with us today, all of the different regions represented, and all the different sectors you're coming from as well. So we'll be sure to keep an eye on everyone who's in the room, and a big, big thank you to you all. This is a quick snapshot on our screen of what you can expect to explore with us today. So of course, Kathy is here, and we're going to talk about leadership as holding space. Within this portion of the webinar, Kathy is going to provide a presentation and then some opportunity for dialogue as well. At the very end of our session, we're going to share a tiny bit about leadership education here at Railroads. We have a brand new specialization called our Executive Leadership Specialization, where we explore values-based leadership. So Kathy's going to tell us a little bit more about what that is and why it's important and how it relates to leadership as holding space. And then, of course, leave time for some wrap-up and closing remarks as well. So with that, Kathy, I will ask us to flip to the next slide and actually pass the baton over to you to get us started.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Selena, and a real heartfelt welcome. It's really my pleasure to be here on this webinar to engage with you all about leadership as holding space. And as well, as Selena said, afterwards to share a bit about leadership education we offer, in particular the Masters of Arts with an Executive Leadership Specialization and our Values-Based Leadership Graduate Certificate, which really is about developing the capabilities of organizational leaders to enhance their own practices and develop organizational cultures for change and innovation. And so, as you know, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Marilyn Taylor, was slated to present on leadership as holding space, and she really wanted to be here today. Unfortunately, she had an accident and she's currently on some painkillers. So we strategized and we're offering a double shot. Today, I'm going to facilitate this session, and then in 2 weeks, Marilyn will be back, and we will have the ability to dig even deeper into leadership as holding space. So for those of you who are seeking Marilyn's wisdom, rest assured, you will have her when she's back and when she's at the top of her game. And for now, you got me. So me, who started years ago as a registered social worker and a counselor working with at-risk youth, and moving into the fields of leadership, business, education, with a deep commitment and respect for holding space. And then, of course, all of us here to delve deeper into leadership as holding space. So our time together, we will be offering opportunities for engagement, hearing new concepts and or stories, and to be in dialogue, as Selena said. And so I'd just like to start with you thinking about, what does leadership as holding space mean to you? And also to us. And so as we launch, I'm going to invite you to take a moment just to get comfortable, to be present with yourself, really present. Feel what it feels like to be you right here, right now, and letting go of all the demands and multitasking that may be calling your attention, and to really connect what it is that called you to this webinar. What are your hopes? What are your needs? And I really invite you to make a quick note of what you're seeking in this webinar, because at the end, we're going to check back to see if your hopes and needs were met. So as you've taken a moment for that, and as we sort of be in our own bodies, in our own time and space at this point, I'd also like to take a moment and this is why Selena had invited everybody to turn on their cameras, to really feel what it feels like to be in this community at this point, to be present with this group of people coming together around leadership as holding space. And so just to let you know, I can't see everybody's gallery view at this moment just because I've got the PowerPoint screen. But I really do invite you, if you haven't already, to switch on your gallery view and your camera so that you're able to be seen and see in community. And of course, it's an invitation. If for whatever reason you feel you don't want to, that's fine too. Because there really are many different ways to come into community. And we can do that with introductions, you know, as Selena started, by having people put things into the chat. We can also do things like saying names in the circle. But for this webinar, I just would like us to also, on the theme of sort of just being with ourselves, to also take in forward shared breaths together in community. Again, to center ourselves, but to center ourselves in community. So we can start with a breath in. One out. One in. One out. In, out, and then the next breath, really deep, full breath in and out. And you can let a sound, a smile, whatever moves you at this point. And so now that we've taken some minutes to be present in ourselves, to be present in this community, I also invite you to be present with our topic. Leadership as holding space, which gets back to the question we started with, which, what does this mean to you? So as we start with our own definitions, we can also utilize the work of Heather Plett to draw upon. Heather Plett is a Canadian speaker, facilitator, and she's the co-founder of the Center for Holding Space. And what I appreciate about her work is that she locates it in a greater context. She speaks to the work of Harrison Owen, who's an organizational facilitator of open space technology. I've worked with his group facilitation method for many years in many different contexts. But she also identifies Donald Winnicott, speaking to a similar language in education, and notes other fields like yoga and spirituality, along with indigenous and ancient wisdom practice. all speaking to holding space. So holding space isn't a new concept, but it is one that's critical in this day and age that we're in right now, especially as leaders. And Heather has also written a fulsome how-to book about holding space. And she's left space for emergent and development of ideas. So I heard a podcast where she was speaking about that this work provides a foundation, but that she's always interested to see where people take it and develop new ideas. And she's committed to emergence and evolution. And this is what I mean about it. We're in a critical time. We definitely are in a state of emergence and evolution, potentially transformation as well. And so for me, I think as leaders, her book is a great resource. And one thing though to note is she does speak to holding space in terms of life on a human level, whereas today we are going to expand and develop, but as she puts out, and weave in and expand some of her framing specifically within the context of leadership. So let's begin with her definition. Holding space is what we do when we walk alongside a person or group on a journey through liminal space. Now, Plett says that a liminal space is a threshold, the space of ambiguity or disorientation that occurs when we find ourselves transitioning from who we once were to who we are becoming. And this is where I was meaning in terms of in our world today, we are transitioning from who we once were, and to who we are becoming. So as leaders, we are really facing some serious challenges in the world today. We only need to look around us. The whole world is talking about what's important and is wanting transformation. Big issues like truth and reconciliation, Black Lives Matters, the Me Too movement, climate change are all demanding our attention. And so leaders are really expected to step up. And as leaders, we need to hold space for understanding and for transformation. And when I say we, I mean both as being ourselves and being in relationship with others for understanding and transformation. And so in her book, toward the end, what I really like about it is that she writes, after a couple years spent working with and writing about holding space, it suddenly dawned on me that there was an important aspect of this concept that I'd missed earlier. Everything I wrote about, taught, and contemplated came down to one profound realization, that the heart of holding space is this: freedom. So Plett contends that the heart of holding space is also freedom, that we hold space so that we all may be free. And when we hold space, we create a container for liberation. A container that holds space for liberation also holds space for sovereignty. Sovereignty as it applies to individuals. So think your body, your heart, your mind, having agency and autonomy, is the starting point to developing healthy, strong social contracts between people in community. So in addition to our personal website, Plett has the Center for Holding Space. So that's another great resource to check out if you want. I heard her speak about how we have lots of resources for self-help, and I find this often in leadership education that we start with the leader and leader development. But what we need more of is community help and development, or leadership development. And so for me, leadership is about developing community, and communities are in many different forms. With the executive leadership program, we really look at organizations, but developing through engagement, through a shared purpose and mission for the greater good. So as we think about holding space for liberation and sovereignty, this moves the concept of holding space for the individual to the community as well. So this offers us some understanding of what holding space is and why it's important. But then how do we do it? So, yay. Plett offers the metaphor of a collapsible bowl. And so she gives this example that she says there's different ways of holding space. So you can do it shallow, you can do it medium-wise, or you can do it deeply. And so as we think about those shallow, medium, and deep, it's on a very basic level of looking at, we can say, how you doing? Could be shallow, fine. We can think of it more on a deeper level, or sorry, on a medium level, which is, how you doing? Well, I'm challenged by work-life balance, having a few challenges. Or we can go really deep, which is around, I'm struggling with some issues of well-being, having some, physical health challenges, some, mental wellness challenges, some social challenges since the pandemic. So again, we can see that this metaphor of a collapsible bowl gives us the ideas around space, that there's different levels to it: shallow, medium, deep. And she also points out, bring back my bowl, that the inner layer of the bowl, so this inner layer of the bowl is what you offer. And the medium or the middle layer of the bowl is what guides you in space. And then the outer layer of the bowl is what supports you. And so being a values-based leader, I find this framing is really helpful, because Plett offers core values and behaviors needed in the bowl. So when she talks about that inner layer of being what you offer is containment, compassion, things like selective non-judgment, guidance, space for complexity, autonomy, flexibility, connection, allyship. That's all what you can offer in this container of holding space. But then she also talks about what guides you. So again, if we think about things like intuition, discernment, humility, courage, curiosity, and then what supports you, the outer layer of the bowl, is sort of mystery, because things are always emerging, and community. And so another way of thinking about this is a diagram that she's put together around holding space, and where she suggests to be the bowl. And so here you can see it more visually, as opposed to my visual metaphor with the collapsible bowl, is that she offers some fundamental concepts around containment, compassion, boundaries, safety and protection, selective non-judgment. And where she's going with selective non-judgment is because she also acknowledges that no space is neutral. And so it's not just about us having, a feel good, let's all just get along on a very shallow level, but to recognize that there is space for complexity, that there is a time for guidance, but also the autonomy and freedom, both individually and collectively, having, again, some of that mystery, connection, bearing witness, which can also be a component of allyship, trust, and flexibility. So you can see there's lots of juicy ways that we can go with these ideas. And we were going to have some time for more deeper dialogue. But as I think of my own practice, I'd like to share a few practices in relationship to these concepts. So as a leader, I set the container. I'm very intentional in setting the container. I do my pre-work. I think about what the outcomes are, what the purpose is. I am prepared with the structure, the content, and the process. In fact, I hope that you can feel this, even if you might not see it in this space, knowing that I have come at this webinar in the same way. So for me, it really is about taking the time and setting the container prior to really be present. And I can become present when I have some of this pre-work behind me. And even so, again, looking at how I show up, head, heart, hand, spirit. Even earlier this morning, I went for a walk out in the woods, just so that I could show up feeling the best that I could possibly be. In this way, setting the container, the clearer that I am, the more able then I'm able to show up in a way that's more fluid and flexible. Because then, as Churchill once said, planning is essential, but plans are useless. Because then it does open up a space to really allow for emergence and be present with what happens and what goes on. So also for me, in any space I hold, I seek to provide opportunities for engagements for individuals and for us collectively together. So to speak to our shared space, you could see in the beginning, I offered an opportunity for you to connect with yourself, with others in the community through 4 shared breaths. Again, because we're in an online Zoom room, so it's how can we creatively potentially do these things. And again, there's many different ways to roam. So this is us sort of thinking about space and showing up and moving with those. Other ways, using the chat. And then further on, you'll see that I have a structured small group and big group activities, because I always think about how we can, on many different levels, show up with space, both modeling and encouraging it. And so that's really, as leaders, is so critical to know that who we are and how we show up in the space sets a tone. And so one of the other principles that I always adhere to is something called challenge by choice. It was a concept by Project Adventure that started way back in the 70s. But really it means that I believe any space is a place for invitation, that you have the choice to choose how much you want to challenge yourself. And that doesn't always mean opting out, this is part of setting a container. It means that, potentially you might want to be an observer, or potentially you might want to contribute in a different way, but to always create a space, to have a container for challenge by choice, and to have room for individuals and community collective growth. So now you might be thinking this is an easy space. And yes, in some ways it is. Yet I've also drawn upon some of these practices, as Plett identifies, when challenges arise in organizational settings. I've been an executive director for a not-for-profit youth serving organization. I've also been the executive director for my local chamber of commerce when I lived up island, and most recently as program head for our Masters of Excel, or Executive Leadership. We've actually framed and structured our classroom around classroom as organization. So we call it the XLKO. And so thinking about an example from there, back in May, when I was facilitating one of our online residencies, we had about 40 people online. That on the actual day, when we had a full day scheduled of presentations and interactive activities, and trying to, again, create this and hold a space for engagement, we received the horrifying news that the remains of 215 children were found buried on the former Kamloops Indian residential school. And I found out about an hour before the day was to launch. And part of us setting space, and if you think about these even in your organizations, if you're having a function, part of setting the space, one of the things that we do is we do open up for any kind of check-in or anything that's come up. And, one woman who was Indigenous, checked in sharing a deep sadness. She just said, I'm really deeply sad by what I've heard. And so at that point I acknowledged, and I stopped and asked if everyone within knew what she was talking about. And some people nodded their heads no, some people, nodded their heads yes, at which point gave her the space then to elaborate and to bring everyone into this space, to hold the place as leaders, to really talk deeper in terms of what was going on. We also had another student who, asked if we could go out into breakout rooms. Now, again, with leadership, it's always about making calls. And at this point, I had felt that there was a strong need for us to stay into the community and to work through this and hold this as a space. At which point, another woman asked to play an Indigenous song of healing. And so we took the time to hear this Indigenous song of healing. We took a minute of silence. I offered resources. We took a break for people to care for themselves. And then we came back. And the reason why I share this is it's holding space is almost like raising a child. It's one size doesn't fit all. So you have to move with the moment, which is where there was intuition, there was hunching, there was curiosity that needed to be engaged in while being fully present in the space, both attending to individual as well as the whole group and the purpose of what that we were to do. And then a beautiful moment for me was after the break, what happened was this Indigenous woman who brought it forward had also connected with another colleague, and they had asked if they could start off our next part to sort of shift people out of that deep feeling of sorrow and loss, knowing that this wasn't a one-shot deal. It was something that would go carry on and carry on. This was a slice in time. People had past history with it. Some people, other people, there's future, like that it was just a moment in time. And so that there was a real commitment to move forward together on what our day for our residency was planned for, while we still held a space for this horrific event. And so I think this is really critical, that there's many points along the way that things could have gone sideways. And so Plett also speaks to the counter of holding space as hijacking space. And so as a leader in a space, I'm always watchful that neither myself or others are hijacking the space, because holding a space liberates, but hijacking a space violates. And so the act of controlling and exploiting is more true to hijacking, whereas liberating and supporting is to hold a space. And so as you can see, Plett points out that we can hijack the space in many different ways. We can, expect others to respond the same way we do. We can act as the tone police when others' emotions are stronger than we're comfortable with. We can one-up another's stories, with a better one. We can dismiss the value of what people are saying. We could, not allow people to sort of trust their own intuition. We can do things like interrupt, dismiss, ignore, fix, shame. We can treat people passively aggressively. We can apologize too much, so that then we make other people responsible for making us feel better. So there's, again, lots of different pieces that can contribute to space being hijacked. So I think I just quickly share another story. I remember when I was in a board meeting with a colleague and was a good friend of mine, and one of the men started to really call her out for not doing a project the way he would have done it. And I was sitting beside her, and I could see her face go red, and I knew she was upset, and I knew she didn't have the words, but I also knew she was an amazing woman who had a fortitude and a strength. And as I was sitting beside her and I was bearing witness, I was also holding a space for her agency. I didn't want to take her power away. And she ended up speaking her truth to him. as things escalated, and when it became obvious that things were heated, and this was beyond the purpose of our board meeting, the actual board chair suggested the three of them meet independently to sort things out. And so, again, I was watchful and being mindful. When would I step in? When would I not? How does this holding space? And then afterwards, we debriefed it, and she was upset by the incident, no doubt. I'm sure we all have those situations. And especially when I didn't defend her. And so again, for me, I shared with her, it's like, when do I, step in to protect or to offer support or to say enough is enough because spaces aren't neutral? Or when is it that I let her know that I'm here and that I believe in her agencies? And so again, it's through these deeper conversations and these nuances of experiences that we have that we want to look at connecting around space. So, if I had stepped in too early, I would have hijacked the space. And as Plett notes, where we fix a problem for someone or take away their power to fix it, that is a way to do that. So as we continue to move forward thinking about, holding space, there are a couple other concepts to speak to. And again, Plett brings up around co-creating safe places, or safe spaces, brave spaces, and I've even gone a little further with colleagues of mine talking about spaces of grace. And so, I think it's really important that, that we really look at how we hold that space. And, I really appreciate the work of Richard Barrett, who speaks to creating values-driven organizations, and that there are different levels of consciousness, from survival and viability to relationship and esteem and performance, transformation or evolution, internal cohesion or alignment, to collaboration and service and contribution. And so when we're in space, people might be coming at a situation from a different level of consciousness or a different place, saying, I'm looking at safety, or I'm looking at, belonging. Other people might be looking at, wanting to transform, and we know that takes risks. So that's where we need brave spaces. But what's really core to this is that we can't assume what those spaces look like for others. So although as leaders, it's really incumbent for us to hold the space, part of that is co-creating the space with others, because we're all in this leadership together. And so, yes, participants are looking for us for our leadership. And we can invite people in and create that so people are able to step out. However, another key concept then to consider is issues of privilege, oppression, and intersectionality. And so again, Plett, speaks to this. And I really appreciate, how she recognizes that we all have privileges based who we are. And she, shares Peggy McIntosh's clarification of white privilege. And as a white woman, I have a variety of privileges I know simply because I was born white. And likewise, I have other privileges which come from being able-bodied, heterosexual, educated. And I don't have some privileges as we think about the master narrative in our systemic world, because I'm a woman. So, I find it really interesting when I'm in a boardroom full of men and I make a point that sometimes that point doesn't get acknowledged. And then later on, another man may speak about it and gets credit for it. And so then I have to, again, look and own my own voice, but also recognize the system upon which I am. And oppressions occur when we don't recognize privileges. And so I've put down Lisa Renee Hall. She offers a great process for exploring unconscious bias and look deeper in terms of anti-racism, but how we can really show up more in terms of the world, so that we don't remain oblivious, which Peggy, speaks to in terms of, having those privileges, but being oblivious to them. And so the point about intersectionality recognizes that we all have an intersectional identity, which is a mix of race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic classes, physical and mental abilities, religion, languages, age, physical attractiveness, and the work that we do, our education levels. So all of these factors are accounted for when we consider our identity, but we don't always bring those recognition as leaders into the space. And so knowing that these elements intersect to form identities and group culture, Plett offers the suggestion of how to hold space at the intersection. And so, really about many different ways, again, to do this. And I'm conscious of our time, because I do want to take some time where you will have time to explore this. And so as you think about some of these pieces, I just think, don't be afraid to flounder. I remember a mentor of mine telling me, we don't stop making mistakes, just more sophisticated ones. And then I also recall a few lines from a poem by Rumi, who says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. But then paradoxically, we also know that there aren't neutral spaces. So really, it's about naming and claiming the space that we're seeking to hold, not hijacking it with shaming, and at the same time recognizing the need to set a container that creates space to disrupt narratives and do things mindfully, so that we really are able to have inclusive spaces to really come together on a deep level around some of these challenges that we're facing in terms of our world. So in a moment, we're going to break into small groups, and I'm going to invite you to take the time to listen, with ears open and heart open to each other's thoughts or experiences or stories around this guiding questions prompt around what are the amplifiers and or barriers that you are experiencing in holding space. Because all of this theory makes sense, yet it's putting it in practice that it can get sticky. And so when we come back, we'll share out some key ideas, themes, and ideas, or questions that you came up with. And in a moment, Selena's going to assign random groups, and you can sort of see the breakout instructions. And, I really invite you to, take a moment to introduce yourselves, share your thoughts and experience or stories around the amplifiers or the barriers, the amplifiers, your success tips, or the challenges you're still working through. And then we can come back. And we've also prepared a collective Google Doc that you can also populate as you're going. So again, recognizing people learn in all different ways. We learn visually, we learn auditorily, we can learn embodied. So we're trying to create a space to be inclusive as possible. And just also want to say, this is back to challenge by choice. You can see that if you're in a break-in room, you have the challenge, you have the choice to simply pass. And I'll also say that if you aren't feeling that you really want to chat with anyone right now, that's okay too. You have the option not to click on to join the breakout room at all. You could just come back into the main room and then just take time to reflect on your own and add into the Google Doc. And in that way, again, we're offering creative places for people to be able to connect in a way that works for them and you at this moment in this time. So in this moment, we're going to have time to harvest our collective wisdom, starting with ourselves, our small groups, and then coming back. And so we're going to have about 10 minutes to do this. And then Selena will give, a 30-second warning. So if for some reason you do get bounced, Selena will let you back in. But at this point, if you have any questions, please speak now. And if not, have fun, and we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Well, welcome back. I see people are coming back, which is fabulous. Really appreciate that. And I see some people have had to jump, and just really lovely to see who's in the room and how we're sort of moving forward, it's just wonderful. And great to see some of the amplifiers. I have my computer desk over here, so I can see some of the amplifiers. Really appreciate how people are speaking and starting to really dig deeper in those. And in terms of barriers, so critically important. For me, one of the challenges or holding space or barrier which has been identified, lack of time or timing. There's definitely, living in a world where we have sort of a chronological linear time frame that we've got, we've allotted a certain amount of time to be here, how we can navigate that. So one of the things I'm delighted about is that these amplifiers, these barriers, these questions arising, whatever doesn't get, dug in deeper. When Marilyn is back in 2 weeks, these are also things that we can bring forward to that. So just know that this is all part of it. And that's part of, I think, working with time, is recognizing that, yes, what can we do in the space that we're in when we're in it? And so I would also like to see if there's any, I see a question a couple questions arising. And at this point, recognizing that we've got just a few minutes, is there anything that anybody would like to bring into our circle, and be sure to highlight or question while we're all here at this point, before we sort of move into the next one with Marilyn. But at this point, from your time together, any ideas, any experiences, any amplifiers, barriers, or questions that you want to bring into the space to deal with at this moment. If you do, feel free to put up your hand, and we can call upon you, or else write in the chat. I can't see it, but if there's a question there, I'm sure Selena will let me know.
Selena, can I just jump in? I was looking for my hand up button and I couldn't find it. I just saw a bunch of smiley faces and hearts. Thank you so much, Kathy. This has been really nice. And I'll just add a quick 10-second piece from our group chat. The very end, Gwyneth in our group said something really nice, and that was that it's so refreshing to have everyone come together and to just feel the change in our group from the very beginning at the start of the conversation, and how soft it got near the end. And I just love that. And so I hope I didn't put her on the spot, but it was quite nice. And I'm definitely feeling that. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. And thank you, Gwen. I mean, I think that's really important to recognize that. And this, I think, comes back to sort of the note, the question around a holistic inclusion of spirituality. I think this is that we recognize that, that we are whole people, that we come together, head, heart, hand, spirit, and whatever that means to people, but that we can feel it, whether we say it or not. I do a wonderful activity, just around getting into a group rhythm, where we actually, when we're in person, we actually clap to find like our rhythm. And the more that we're using a variety of our senses, this is where we can really tap deeper into those holding space areas. So thank you for that. Anything else anyone else would like to throw in? I see a hand up. Hey, I see a hand up. Yay. And I can't see a name with your hand up, but I saw you smile when I said I saw a hand up. I see James. There you go. Please.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Okay.
Thanks for today. It's awesome. There was just one thing I want to bring forward from our group. There's a lot of good chats made, but one of the people in our group had space held for her and pointed out what a transformational experience it was to really be in that as the recipient of it. And I mentioned there's a men's group that I am a part of on a weekly basis where we hold space for each other to speak, and it's the same kind of thing. I can certainly relate to that. But yeah, we're talking about how to present it, but on the receiving side, it really is a very meaningful thing to receive.
Thank you. Absolutely. Like it all belongs, as Richard Rohr says, you know, like it's about the full paradox in terms of giving, receiving, in terms of, you know, being, doing, how it all sort of comes together. And it's creating communities and spaces like this, and to have these deeper dialogues is where we really can grow and develop our pieces. Now, I'm conscious of time, but I also know that this is recorded. So if anybody needs to leave, feel free to leave. This kind of is our closing piece. Closing, I would say, is, you know, I do invite you to look back in terms of what your hopes and what your needs were for this session, and see if they were addressed. And if they're not, one, you can either bring them in now and we can look at, you know, collectively seeing if that can happen. Two, you can bring them next time, you know, with Marilyn. Three, you can write them in the chat. We got lots of, you know, one of the things I love about holding space too is that whenever we put something out, we always have the ability to say yes, say no, or make a counteroffer. So when you look at your own, with your own hopes and needs, did you get what you wanted out of today's session? And if you didn't, I will create a space to sort of make sure that you can, if you want to hear, or I will also invite you, if you want to speak to me later. You'll see on the slides my email address too, that you can certainly reach out at any time to me. All right, well, I'm seeing some people are clicking off. So my hope is that you've expanded your understanding of holding space, and you receive some gems that you can apply while holding, you know, leadership space with others, and for yourself too. There is that real, again, it's not just about others, and it's not about, you know, us. Sometimes it's about me. And when I say me, I mean you as well, and our individual and our collective. So, you know, at this point, I'm going to sort of put a button on this holding space. Know that we will also hold space for when we meet with Marilyn. And for those of you who are interested in leadership education, I'm happy to give you a little bit of an overview in terms of our program. And so, you know, as I said, I'm the program head for our Masters of Arts with the Executive Leadership Specialization and our Values-Based Leadership Graduate Certificate. And within our school, just know that we do have other programs, but as the program head and my passion for, I'm going to focus in on our Executive Leadership Specialization. And I just want to start by saying that, you know, we have this mythology in the Western world that Whitnor had deemed as genius without learning. That there's this false notion that genius does not need study, it doesn't need exposure to work of others or craftsmanship. It does. And so holding space is a foundational leadership practice, and a practice means it's something to continue on and do. And continue to work with throughout our lifetimes and throughout all the communities and organizations and groups that we are. And the other thing that I find that, you know, one of the things that I'm passionate about executive leadership is that people are often promoted to mid-level or senior level positions because they're effective in their sort of technical or professional roles. But then when they take on this new leadership roles, they're often unprepared for what awaits them. Or how to navigate the human side of organizational life and the power of creating culture to make the magic happen. And so it really is clear that different capabilities are needed for organizational wide responsibilities by executive leaders that involve purpose and vision and mission and values and action and engagement. And so this is really amplified in uncertain times or in liminal spaces. And so I'm just going to move to my next slide. So, you know, stepping up to address these needs, we have the executive leadership specialization, which is designed, as I said, especially for mid-level to senior leaders. And while there are many leadership courses that teach you what to do as a leader, this program is very core about how to be a leader. So it's an immersive program for people who really want to promote change and transform and lead in their organizations. And in these times, of compelling challenges, on all fronts, social, environmentally, economically, politically, skillful, collaborative, and engaged leadership within organizations really is critical. And so, although we know that every person within the organization has the ability to engage in leadership, executive leaders have the role and the authority and the responsibility to lead the way, focusing on the organization as a whole. And so in this program, for the Master of Arts, it's 24 months, it's 36 credits. You can see it's blended, it has 2 residencies, there's some units, 9 units of electives, and then there's a capstone, which is about an engaged leadership project. And then we also have the graduate certificate in values-based leadership, which is for 6 months. So for those of you who might already have a degree but want to, engage more with values-based leadership, it's the first term of our MA in executive leadership. And so in terms of looking at how it's structured, you can see that it runs concurrently. The graduate certificate runs concurrently with the MA in leadership. And it's really the grounding and orientation. So you might wonder, why values-based leaders? Values-based leaders really enable leaders to walk the talk, to be explicit, identify and be intentional with values, to be authentic leaders, to be trustworthy leaders. And really our current workplaces are calling for it. And so, values-based leaders can really hold this deep space for transformation. And so, after completing the first term, then you have a choice of electives, then you head into the second term, again, for that deeper understanding and application of organizational change leadership. And then you finish with leading change in practice. As I said, your capstone is through an engaged leadership project. And this project really is your opportunity to test, run your capabilities and build your experiences with, mentorship and coaching within your organization. So we have a couple upcoming intakes. So next year, April 19th, 2020. So our application is coming up, our deadline is coming up in June. And then, in January. In June, we will be finishing our first term of the first 2 courses. But in terms of this, you can check out our website for more information, or you can get in touch with our enrollment services people for more information. Or as I said, feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to chat about the program, around learning, around leadership. And also just want to let you know, we do have, for our program, a special event around leaders learning from leaders, where we invite leaders from the field to come in and speak to our leaders. And so if that's something that you're interested in seeing what that classroom experience might look like, please reach out to me too. And I'm more than happy to invite you. It happens the first Wednesday on every month from 5 p.m. PDT. So at this point, I will just, say thank you. It's nice to see. I mean, our numbers have slowly, gone down, but it's really nice to see who's still here. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, and just really want to say, just really lovely to be in a space where we're all thinking leadership. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Selena, for any final words.
Kathy, you have wrapped it up so wonderfully. So very few to no words from me now. Just a big thank you to everyone who joined us live, participated in the Google Doc, and those who are watching the recording as well. For those who are watching live, know that we'll get the recording out to you tomorrow, as well as more information about Leadership is Holding Space, Part 2, coming in 2 weeks with Dr. Marilyn Taylor. So have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where in the world you're joining us from or when you're watching this recording. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.